Hey everyone, this is Dre with Brothers United Leadership Development. We're here with our Build Black Wealth podcast, and I'm joined with the beautiful and lovely Michelle Lang Raymond of Acts on Stage. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good to be here.
I'm glad you could
Thanks
join
for the
us.
invite.
Yes, for sure. So we're going to jump right into these questions. This is going
Okay,
to be a conversation. Relax.
I'm chill.
It's all community. That's what's up. So tell us a little bit about yourself and the industry that you're in, and the background. A little bit of background of how you got into that.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'm here as a co-founder and representative of Acts on Stage Theater. Um, it opened in 2020, and so that's the industry that I found myself in now, the performing arts, the creative arts, and yeah, that's where I'm making my home. It's a beautiful thing.
That's what's up. So, did you always want to be in theater?
You know, so so if you look at the timeline of my jobs in my life, then somebody would say, well, no, because at some point theater became the thing, but for a long time, you wouldn't have seen that on my resume. But I think if you really sort of swim deeper into the line into the words and the descriptions of the jobs that I've had over my life, I think you would see that the arts, the performing arts, the creative arts were always a part of what I was passionate about, right? And I think so to some degree, it's always been like what woke me up and what made me want to do. Like any job I've ever had, I always looked for how it could be done more artistically, and so I think to some degree, yes. When I grew up in the South, and I'm part of one of the Mississippi families where you would have a backyard, and all the cousins would go out to the backyard and put on talent shows for the older people. Right. So I feel like to some degree, the value of the arts was like literally in my culture, in my family's culture, right? And then we moved up to New Jersey and New York, and my mom used to take me to see shows on Broadway. And I remember, like, I saw the original Wiz and the original For Color Girls, and I saw the Jacksons, right, in New York, and I saw Miriam Makeba in New York, and I just remember being in those spaces as a little kid, just being engrossed in the artistry, right? And the beauty of it, the magic of it. They call it theater magic or show magic. I just remember being taken by the magic, not just of what like was happening on the stage, but what was happening in the audience, right? Like for this hour or two, this idea that people felt some kind of unification or synergy or energy that made us all better, and that something that the artist produced could create that in people, could create that kind of community in people. Um, I do think that I was gripped by that as a kid. Like as a kid, I thought, wow, how do they do that? And I always want to see that happening in the world. So on one hand, so everybody, I think all of us, and while we're in college or whatever, you're blessed if in your young adult age you get to start working in the field that is your passion. But I think most of us probably take journeys that are a little off the path, while you find that path. So
Well, it sounds like you went down a path from home and then ended up back home. Like this is really who you are at your
yeah,
core. Is what I'm hearing is
yeah,
really about the community and really how you were. It was ingrained in you.
yep.
And you talked a little bit about our next question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. What is your motivation to continue the work that you do, and like who or what do you do it for?
Yeah. One of the I think I have a couple answers for that. I think one of the values of Acts on Stage is that we believe the arts are divine, right? We believe the arts are a divine gift from God, that are not utilized as much as they should. And one of the reasons why they should be utilized is because they just allow us to process life from a different filter, from a different way. Like we get, especially as adults, we sort of get in ways that we just think about life, and we think about life in terms of facts and figures, right? And so how we feel gets set aside, or how we process things gets set aside, even though how we feel about things is just as valid as those facts and figures, right? And so one of the motivations I have for the arts is because I know that it creates awareness, mindfulness, thoughtfulness that you just can't get anywhere else. And I think people who are active in the arts, I don't know. I feel like they are just more in touch with the human experience, maybe, than some. And that doesn't mean that they have to be an artist all the time. I just think when we engage the arts, something about it helps us touch the human experience more. So that's one of my motivations. I just think the arts are divine in a way that nothing else is in the world. So that's motivating. I think what the arts do to audiences is another one of my motivations, and what we get to do, particularly at Acts on Stage, what we get to do in the life of artists is part of my motivation. We just closed a show with Tia and Nashay.
It was
right?
beautiful.
Spoken. Thank you.
The crew
Thank you.
came out. It was beautiful.
The brothers came out. We just closed a show with Tia, and night after night after night, we saw how her show impacted the audience. Right, we have a signature at Acts on Stage where we close every show where the director comes out and speaks to the audience. And so the director of the show, our artistic director, is Isaiah Anderson Jr., and he comes out and he brought Tia out, and he just has a little chop it up with the audience. And night after night after night, people talked about just how they were touched and how they were healed, right, and how they were transformed, right? So that's a huge reason why we do it, like the potential for what it can do for the audience. Now, what the audience didn't see, they saw it because of the show, but what the audience didn't see, which is another motivation for me, is how that journey of creating that show impacted Tia.
Right.
Right? And so for 2 months, a little, even over 2 months, Tia, as an artist, essentially workshopped her show with Isaiah, with me, with her family probably, where for 2 months she had to spend time really thinking about, how do I create something that is valuable and meaningful? And Isaiah will tell you, she always said that she wanted her show to have healing, right? And so that doesn't happen by accident, right? The artist has to go through a process. The artist has to do that work for that to happen. And so one of my other deeper motivations is knowing when artists really do that work, they really become purveyors, I think, of healing or challenge or awakening in a way, again, that no other art form, that no other form of delivery can do. And so I think those are, I'm a girl, so I have a lot of words, right? Those are some of the ways that I would say I'm motivated every day by this work, just the divinity of it, the way it impacts audiences, and the way that it journeys artists.
Yeah, it's dope. The show was dope, definitely touching and healing for everybody, I think, who attended. I was able to hear the talk back and been to other shows, and I think that's a signature, that really where you guys are creating community, not just come get the show and we'll see you later.
Yep.
That you guys are actually engaging people in community conversations.
And that is a huge thing for us, right? We want to move audiences from being consumers to being contributors. We want audiences to feel like they are participating in an experience, not just consuming it. I think somewhere in society, recent years, 20, 30 years, audiences of all kinds have just kind of become consumers, especially theater, because there is sort of this way where the stage is there and the audience is here, and so the audience sits there and just consumes. Unlike concerts, where a lot of times the audience is sort of wrapped around the stage, and it's you feel like the community of it. Well, at theater, you have to create that in different ways, and so for us, that after show conversation is honestly a part of the reason why we do it. Right. We want community to be at the heart of what we're doing.
Dope. So can you describe your journey? You talked about different, just with your family, you talked about your education, you talked about the other jobs you've had. Like, can you talk about your journey towards success and what has been some of the biggest lessons that you've learned in that journey?
Did I talk about my education?
Well, you talked about just like going to school and different stuff. I mean, you didn't drill into it, but I picked up that you were talking about your education.
Yeah,
and
I say that because honestly, based on my education and Isaiah, who's again our artistic director, neither of us should have this job or this theater. Neither of us have formally gone to school for this. But again, the education of pursuing our passion in it, I think, is what has qualified us for these positions and these roles. So So what was your question?
I barely graduated high school, so you ain't got to explain to me.
Well,
So.
I say that, honestly, I hope I say that as an inspiration
Well,
to
part of
people.
education is just your journey as well. The way I look at it is like you talked about how you can connect the dots from the work that you were doing
Yeah.
and how you always centered what your passion is. So I look at that as part of your education. So my question was, what are some of your journeys towards success? Like,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that, and then what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned through that journey?
Yeah. So the journey towards, so I think one of the things I feel like I have done well by accident or on purpose is no matter what job I had or had to have, right? I stayed close to my passion for this, right? And a lot of time, and that's not everybody's story.
Right.
And for some people doing that is harder than others, right? But even if I had a job, I remember one time I had a job at a appraisal company, like a property appraisal. I don't even know what it was. That's
Right.
how much I didn't care. But it was a job where they just appraise houses, right?
Right.
And this is real talk. My job was to take the pictures that the appraisers will go take of properties and make photocopies of the pictures.
Right.
So I just need you to like really process that, right? Take photocopies of pictures. That was my whole job.
Right.
And when I wasn't making photocopies of pictures, I was just answering phones and, being a switchboard, right? And I would take those copies, I would take those pictures and I would write story. When I would give them back to the appraiser, I would have written the story on the bottom of some of those copy sheets, right? Or I would take the pictures and I would frame them in different ways that was just a little bit more creative. And I don't know if that got on people's nerves or not. I don't know if they liked that or not.
Right.
But I had to do that for myself,
Right.
because I knew deep down I was an artist. And, I was raised a lot of times in the black church for a lot of part of my life. I was raised in black church. And so I didn't know to call myself an artist or creative for a long time, because for a long time, anytime that they would introduce me in church, they would say, well, here comes Michelle in her special way. And I was like, I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know what that means. Like, in her special way feels like calling somebody interesting.
Right.
Right. And it was like, I don't know if that's good or bad. But whatever it was, I knew that I needed to put meaning to things. Right. And that's what it is to be an artist and to be a creative. And so even in jobs like the appraisal photocopier job, I found ways to just try to, exercise, right, that part of who I am. And so I feel like that's always been a huge part of how I've, lived out my life. Is like, even if I don't get to be all that I want to be, how can I always be exercising that part of myself that I know I am?
Well, in Seattle, we got a saying is you can't stop the rain, right? You can't. The rain's coming.
It's coming.
Yeah,
like
so
that's such a good way to say that, because that's true. You can't shut that off, right? And I think a lot of times people who find themselves wanting to do something or be something, and maybe it doesn't pay the bills the way they want it to, and they want to like lay it aside. But the truth is you can't. Like, you do got to pay the bills and you got to take care of your family and take care of yourself. But if there's something in you that will not cease, then rather than constantly try to suffocate it every day, let it live.
Right.
Find a way for it to breathe. Find a way for it to grow. Find a way for it to have life, because it'll be life-giving to you. And so I just think that's just, I don't know if I had somebody say that to me early in my life. I think I did, actually. Maybe not in those words, but I think somewhere I knew that you have to let that part of yourself live.
Yeah, and that's hard when you're dealing with capitalism because you
is.
got bills to pay, and it's difficult, and you're trying to fit into whatever system you're in to try to thrive in there to not feed. So I guess that's a great lesson towards success, is actually to make sure you're not shutting off who you are. And with that, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with the lovely Michelle Lang Raymond here in a second.
Get informed about your rights as an employee working in the city of Seattle. Check out Build's labor law information at www.build206.com/labor standards today.
Welcome back to the Build Black Wealth podcast. We are here with the lovely Michelle Lang Raymond from Acts on Stage. I don't think I said this already, but we also part of our Build Black Wealth Incubator program. We invested $1,000 in 20 Black-led businesses and organizations, and Acts on Stage was an easy pick for us to invest those resources into.
We received it easily.
Yeah, we tried to make it real low barrier because when you try to navigate those applications and stuff, that sometimes they make it more difficult than what it has to be. I'm happy that you're able to join me. We're going to jump back in here. Yeah. What resources do you think are needed by others in our community to succeed in business or run an organization, et cetera? Like what resources do you feel like are most needed?
Yeah, I mean, you already mentioned how you guys gave us some money. So, anybody who doesn't say money in this question is not being honest. So one, you need money. You need money, whether it's large sums or small sums. You need money to do what we do. But I think the second thing that we have to have is relationships, and I think people really undervalue the value of relationships, and not just relationships, but relationships that are mutually beneficial. Right? Sometimes you can lend to somebody, and I'm not just talking about money, you can lend the value of who you are to somebody, and then sometimes they can lend that to you, right? And you don't always get to pick and choose, and it's not always you give, I give, you give. Right. Sometimes it's you give, and now I can give. Right. Sometimes it's not equal, and it's not, what's that word, predictable, right, how those relationships are going to fare on each other. But you cannot underestimate how important relationships are, because you can spend a lot of time developing something, right? Developing an idea or a product. And then when you're ready to put that product out to the public, nobody knows who you are. Right. And not only do they not know who you are, they don't care. Right. Because they don't, and I'm not saying that to be mean, real. But they don't know who you are, and they don't care about what you have to sell because they have no connection to you whatsoever. Sometimes, I know this for a fact, some people have supported Acts on Stage since day one, before we produced anything, simply because they have a relationship with me, or they have a relationship with Isaiah, or both of us. Right. And not just relationship to us, but to our work, right? And they committed to us just because of that. Right. They're like, I don't know what you're going to produce, but I know it's going to be worthwhile. Right. And so I think you can't underestimate how important those relationships are. And I know that's hard for people who are like introverts and who are like just want to go. I know a lot of particularly guys in music who just want to go to their basement, right? Or video gamers just want to be in their basement and create by themselves. Right. And then when they're ready, they want to like pop it out, on the world. And I'm like, that's not how it works. You have to have relationships, because I can only talk about myself so much. At some point, I'm going to need you, right, I hope, to be talking about me and my work too, right? And that's double what I can do by myself. So I think that is a resource that is really important. I think third, reputation, and that kind of goes along with relationship. Reputation is super important. Like, people need to know something positively reputable about you, whether that's you care about your community, whether that's you provide good services, whether that's you are on time and efficient, right, but your reputation does count as a resource. And I think so many times people want people to dismiss that. Like, it don't matter if you like me. It does, actually. Yeah. Right? Or even if they don't like you, they like your work, right? So reputation, I think, is super important. And then the last thing I think is a resource is opportunities to work your ideas, to work your product, right? When I still sing, but not as much as I used to. But I used to go to camps, right? And I would kind of work my songs out at camp, right? Before I would come back to Seattle and like record a whole CD. Back in the day, I know kids don't record CDs anymore.
The 8-track.
But right, before I would come back to Seattle and spend thousands of dollars on a CD, I would workshop my songs at camp just to make sure people liked them. I was like, Because I see so many, especially young artists, you know, they get a song idea, they got 10 songs, and they immediately jump and be like, I'm going to go to the studio and record a CD. And I'm like, for what? And they're like, what do you mean for what? I got good songs I want people to hear. Who?
Right.
Who's going to hear it? And who do you know is waiting on your stuff? And how do you know your stuff is good if you haven't taken opportunity to put it out there,
test
and
the market,
test it out,
test the
workshop
market.
that thing? And so I think those are resources, and those are I don't know, stepping points. I think you have to consider, no matter how great your product is, or your service is, or whatever is, you have to do that work.
Yeah, and I want to spend a little bit of time before we jump to the next question and talk about the importance of relationships. That's a key foundational pillar of Brothers United Leadership Development. Like, we really rock with each other and really friends before anything else. In our community, talking about Build Black Wealth, we have a lot of wealth of knowledge, resources, and things like that. And a lot of times, a lot of resources that are coming out is very transactional. They're going to give you this to do that. There's not a lot of resources. So we try to reframe our resources or work with folks that give us resources and be transparent and say, hey, we're going to spend time building community, building relationships, because there's not a lot of resources. I feel like there needs to be more resources for that, just for what you're talking about. And then you can slow down and not get off the transactional and get into the work that's transformational, which is really about building those relationships, building that trust and that equity. Like you talked about the deposits and withdrawals, right? It's the same thing as anything else. If you're only giving deposits and no withdrawals, then your credit is out of whack, right? The account's out of whack. But everything's not all about money. People can volunteer, people can bring food, people can watch kids, people can do arts and crafts, people can do, even this simple stuff, share what people are sharing out there, because they know what it's about. And so really, making sure, I really agree with that. And it's one of our core foundations with Build is really making sure that we're able to leverage the resources that we have in our community. And I think that's what's going to get us to Black Wealth. It's not just injecting. You can give us a bunch of money, and we've seen the money be injected and the relationships weren't there, and then people start fighting, and capitalism starts kicking in its mind and this and that. But if you got relationships, then we feel like that could be leveraged.
Yeah, and it's
greatly.
not always looking at people and looking at those relationships for what can you do for each other, right?
Right.
But like just genuinely
Right.
having relationship with people.
One of our members said the action can be distraction.
Yeah.
We're trying to go out and do all this stuff. Really, we are the stuff. If we really sit down and build relationships and spend time and really care about each other and love on each other, the action's going to come organically. So sometimes we just like, they got us in this mind frame of, go get and then you got to do, or, solve these problems for this little bit or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we really are trying to change the narrative and try to push other people, because funders and stuff, they need people to do stuff. And if we tell them what we need, they're going to have to get in line. But as long as we're willing to do the dance, how they're having us dance, and it's going to be more difficult to change. So I agree with you. It's not building relationships to try to like, hey, I'm going to build a relationship with you to get what I can get. But it's ultimately transactions are going to come out of it, but they're going to be more transformational because I know who you are.
Yep.
I know what you're about. I know if something happens, or if I got to give you negative feedback, it's easier for me to give you negative feedback
If
because
we're
we have
in
equity in that relationship
right,
instead of it getting all funky, right?
Right.
Because funky stuff's going to happen.
We when was this? I don't forget what month it was, but my husband and I met a couple at an event, and I won't say I know all the Black people in Seattle, but I know a lot of them, right? But so we were at this event and we saw this couple who I was like, I've never seen them before, and we ended up sitting next to them and just really being nice, right? Just striking up relationships, striking up a conversation. Come to find out that they had just moved here. I want to say maybe 6 months prior, and so they didn't have relationships yet. So the longer, the more we found out about how new they were to this area, we were like, oh, well, give us your number. Take our number. We'll tell you. We'll tell you where you can find this and where you can find that, and da da da. And so we just were like just being relational, right? We were just like, they're new. We know how it feels to be new people in a new city. Right. So let's just try to be relational in a way that is just good for them. That we don't know them. We don't know even if there is anything that it could be transactional. We're really just going to be relational, right? And so we ended up sparking a friendship with this couple, and then a couple months later, I invited them to come see the Teen Summer Musical. And when they came to see the Teen Summer Musical, they were just so blown away. The husband probably more than the wife, which is saying a lot. They were just so blown away by not just the show, but being in the room with all the people and just all of it.
Right.
And so at the end of that, they called me after, and said, hey, do you guys, throw a party or anything for the cast? We want to help you with that.
Right.
Like we want to extend our home to you, and we want to help you. We actually want to throw the party. We want to host it. Y'all just bring the kids. When I tell you that this house was amazing, and when I tell you that they hosted from top to bottom, food and decorations and so many things,
Right.
way more than we could have done on
Right.
our own for the kids, right? And that came just because we met them. We were relational with no agenda. We were relational just to say, you are new and we want to connect.
You
right?
were being transformational. You were trying to
There
transformational.
it is, right?
On there, yeah.
And a lot of times people are like, well, I don't really give myself to people. I don't really give that much energy to people if I don't know if we're going in the same direction. Well, you won't know
until you try.
Or even if you're just genuinely invested in building your community in ways that have nothing to do with transactions.
Right. That's real. Thank you for sharing that story. That's beautiful. As an entrepreneur, what is one tip or trick that you've learned that has helped you succeed?
So I'm really afraid of the word entrepreneur. If you had asked me 10 years ago, 20 years ago especially, if I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I would have said absolutely not. I like somebody else being responsible for my check. I like somebody else being responsible for my benefits. I like the security of that, even though I know now in my maturing that that's not guaranteed either. Any day now, somebody could come in the room and you don't have that security. But I would have said 15, years ago, there's no way. I don't want that. And so I get timid really when people call me an entrepreneur because I still have some of that. In my
Socialization. You've been socialized.
I have,
yeah.
and I don't. I think some of that is even being a woman,
right?
Being a woman of color, and other things, right? Just other ways that entrepreneur just sounds like you have to have it together, right? To do that, and you have to know what you're doing, and you have to know how it all works out, and you have to, right? And so so one of the things I would say to that I've learned is you don't have to know it all.
Right.
You just have to be committed to whatever you're committing to, right? That it needs to wake you up in the morning, and that something other than the work or the money or even the recognition you get has to motivate you, right? Because there are days, I feel all emotional. There are days when the product and the money and even the recognition is not enough.
Right.
There are days. Sorry.
That's real. No, that's real.
There are days when you're like, it is not worth it. This is not worth it.
Right.
Especially we're in theater, so like we do shows like every 3 months, right? And so in between those shows, there are days where you're like, who thought this was a good idea?
Right.
This is terrible, right? But then Tia comes to you and says, I want to trust you with my idea, or I want to trust you to produce my show, right? Or again, you meet a couple that just moved here from Atlanta and they couldn't find community, and you brought them to it. You know what I mean? And so you have to love those parts of whatever you are entrepreneuring more than you love either the money that you hope to get or the recognition that you hope to get or just doing the work or even just being your boss. There has to be something else about it that you love more, right? And I think for me, I love people, I love the arts and what I believe they do, and I love how God shows up, right, in what we do. And so that motivates me. When the other stuff isn't motivating, that motivates me. I think your actual question, I don't know how I got on that, but your actual question was what lessons have I learned? I think some of the lessons I've learned is pay attention to the numbers, right? So this is kind of counter to what I just said. So you got to know what intangibly motivates you, right?
Right.
But while you care about what intangibly motivates you, you have to pay attention to the numbers.
Right.
You have to pay attention to your budgets, right? You have to pay attention to your engagement numbers. What I mean by that is, if you throw an event and only 10 people come, you have to own, and you meant for 100 people to come.
Right.
You have to own only 10 people came, and you have to figure out why.
Right.
The numbers don't lie, right? On the other side too, if you threw an event and you expected 100 people to come, but 800 people came, that number don't lie either.
Right.
And you need to ask yourself, why was that so successful? Why did that work? And you have to ask yourself also, why didn't something work? We did the Teen Summer Musical a few months ago, and those numbers were not as good as I wanted them to be. And as the thing about Teen Summer Musical is like warm and fuzzy.
Right.
Like everybody feels good about Teen Summer Musical. Like when you go and you see these kids performing and you see what's going on and you have, that debrief afterwards, it's all good. It's all wonderful. But I have to look at that number too. That
Right.
number was not right, or that number was not the goal. Why not?
Right.
And you have to be honest about that. On the flip side, you look at Tia's show, and it was more than we expected.
Right.
Okay, we got to look at that number. What did we do right? What worked that we want to do again? And so I think one of the things I'm learning as an entrepreneur is you got to pay attention to the numbers. All the other things I said, relationships, reputation, good product, good service, all that stuff matters. But the thing that I'm learning most about the business of entrepreneurship is you got to pay attention to the numbers. The numbers do not lie.
Yeah, I would agree. The administrative pieces, that's looking at the data, process improvement, budgets, taxes, making sure you're crossing T's and dotting your I's. But give yourself some grace. We're coming out of COVID.
Yep.
If people are trying to figure out how to get out and move around and all that. So, I went to the summer musical. I went to it twice. It was dope.
Yep.
It was a good.
It's always gonna be dope.
Good, warm and fuzzy.
It is.
So yeah, it was
Even
dope.
for grown men, it's a good time. It is.
So what's the best advice you could give someone who's just trying to get started in organizing or community or business? Like I think you shared some beautiful gems
I think
already,
so. Oh man. The best advice I can give, I feel like I've shared some of those things already. I would say support other people is another piece of advice. Don't be so just into your thing. That's the only time people see you, right? But I would say support other people. And then I think I would say too, when people come to say they want to support you, believe them. Right. I think a lot of times, we get humble, or we pretend to be humble, and when people come along and say, "I want to support you," you kind of like, yeah, you just kind of shoo it off. But if people come to you and say that they want to support you, own that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like own that, and you might not know how to utilize them in that moment. But hold tight to that, like hold on to that, and as things come up, know that there are people who want to support you. That's honestly how Acts on Stage got here, right? Somebody came along to me and said, I see what you do. I see the work that you do. I see the way that you work. I see the way that people engage you. I see the way that you engage people, right? And honestly, this is a lot of people don't know the Acts on Stage story, but in short, somebody came along to me and said, if you had funding, what would you do? And I was like, why are you even asking me that? And they're like, because I see you and I see what you do and I see how you do it and I see how people respond and I see what you connect yourself to and I see how you move, and I have the capacity to underwrite that. And honestly, Dre, when they first came to me, I was like, well, what do you want me to do? He's like, I don't want to tell you what I want you to do. I want to know what you want to do. And I threw it off. I was like, and if you can't tell me exactly what you're going to get me this money for,
Right.
if you can't tell me exactly what's going down, I'm good. I'm going to stay at my secure job at the
Right.
university. I'm good. And it took 2 years. It took 2 years for me to take him seriously, for me to take that offer seriously, to the point that I woke up one night, woke up in the middle of the night, and I say it was the Holy Spirit. Really, I was pissed. and I felt like I was angry, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was like, why am I angry? Like, what am I angry about? And I know this is not the show, but let me just say it. I just have to say it the way
go
I
ahead.
mean it.
You're good.
I woke up one night, and I had on what I felt like was a spirit of anger. I just woke up in the middle of the night, and I was just mad. And I was like, what am I mad about? Like, who pissed me off today that I didn't check, right? I was like, like what moment went unchecked, right? What didn't I do today? Like, why am I so angry? And I'm not an angry person. So for me to sort of feel like I woke up angry, it was like, this is different. And I just asked God, I was like, what's going on? Like, why? And I eventually fell back asleep. And when I woke back up later that same morning, I know it was the Holy Spirit said to me, you have known what you want to do your whole life. You have known what your dream job is your whole life. And I was like, absolutely. And I even said what that job was, and it was to be a founder and executive director of a theater. And I was like, okay. And the Holy Spirit to me said, so why, when I sent somebody to help you, do you keep telling them you don't know when you do know?
Right.
And I literally got on my phone right that second. And I called the person who had been chasing me for 2 years. I called that person. I said, I'm so sorry. I think I just finally got what I might have should have got 2 years ago. I think I just finally got it. So can we re-engage that conversation? And within 6 months, Acts on Stage largest big investment was made, and we were able to start. And so I would just say to people, I don't even know what the question was. I just feel like that was important to share. I just feel like when people come along and say they believe in you and they want to support you, believe in that.
Right.
That's not, people don't have to do that. The same way nobody has to follow you on Instagram.
Right.
Believe that. If somebody does, believe that.
Right. So before we end, I want you to share how folks can get in contact with you and the amazing work you're doing at Acts on Stage. We're definitely got it in the description, but as you know, with theater and everything else, people connect and receive information different ways. So I want you to have an opportunity to share that.
Absolutely. The simplest way is to go to our website, actsonstage.com, ACTS onstage.com, and then you can find all of our other socials. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We're on Twitter, but we don't really tweet that much.
Twitter's falling apart now by an entrepreneur.
I was going to say, I don't even think I want that Twitter life at this point. So don't find us on Twitter. Just find us, honestly, on Instagram and Acts on Stage. I mean, and Facebook. And then come see a show. We have a building in White Center, Seattle. Come see a show. Get on our mailing list and find out about our shows, and then come through.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for being part of our community and the community. Once again, everybody, this is Dre with the Build Black Wealth podcast. Until next time, peace.